the movie Expelled. This was about intelligent design, and really the idea behind the movie was a lot of biologists and college professors that do believe in intelligent design were losing their jobs because the naturalist mainstream really can't tolerate any diversion from the status quo worldview. Now, there was somewhat of a confrontation between Ben Stein and the world's most famous atheist, Richard Dawkins, who's an Oxford zoologist. He wrote the book, The God Delusion. Interestingly, when Ben Stein cornered him, on the origin of life, and Dawkins said, well, we don't really know how it started. Well, he said, well, is there any possibility that intelligent design could explain the origin of life? And what did Dawkins do? He went right for panspermia. It could be that sometime earlier, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved, probably by some kind of Darwinian means, probably to a very high level of technology, and designed a form of life that they seeded onto this planet. So here we have, the world's most outspoken atheist who says that we're delusional, telling us that we are created by aliens. Dr. Michael Heiser, he's a biblical scholar. He's a Semitic languages expert. He actually had him for Old Testament in seminary. He's the academic editor for Logos Bible Software, and he also tracks this UFO phenomenon. He's got a blog called UFO Religions. But he wrote on panspermia, and I thought his quote was really interesting. He says, it paves the way for a true merging of science and religion. It will be the paradigm that allows the atheist to tolerate religion and allows literalist Bible readers, the Eastern Buddhist, and the pagan to simultaneously parse the new science the same way. This might, in turn, be useful fodder for a global religion. That's really interesting to me. What he's saying is, this idea that perhaps we were seeded on the earth by aliens would be a unifying element that could bring all these divergent worldviews together. This is Dr. Timothy Daly. He's a senior fellow at the Family Research Council. Pretty sober fellow. He wrote a book called The Millennial Deception, and he was looking at this UFO phenomenon about the same way that Tom and myself have, and others. Men and women are being deceived into accepting a non-Christian worldview. And for what purpose? The way is being prepared for the ultimate appearance of Antichrist. Dr. Daly concluded that we're witnessing a masterful satanic subterfuge that appears to involve the appearance of angels and aliens. Many are asking, can the coming of Antichrist be far removed? And this takes us back to the main thesis that I gave you at the beginning, that belief in spiritually superior extraterrestrial beings uniquely provides a credible basis for everyone, from secular scientists, from Richard Dawkins, right, all the way across the whole spectrum of religious belief, New Agers, Buddhists, whoever, to accept an individual who claims deity. And that's what the Antichrist is going to do. Now, we look at these prophecies. He blasphemes God. They call him the man of sin or the man of lawlessness. He opposes God. He sits in the temple proclaiming himself to be God. When I look at all those prophecies, it's really hard for me to believe that Richard Dawkins is going to worship the Antichrist as a god. It really is. But what if the Antichrist is a man that has some kind of connection to these aliens that Richard Dawkins thinks are really advanced, technological marvels or whatever? I think that has a lot more power to explain how everyone could fall under the spell of that. Now, it's interesting. The Bible does say during the tribulation that Satan and his angels are going to be thrown down to earth. Now, there's some debate about this passage, but I think that that's going to occur sometime, right in the few years before Jesus appears. And perhaps aliens will be the explanation for their appearance. I don't know, but that would probably work. Interestingly, in the book of Daniel, it talks about the Antichrist worshiping a god of fortresses. Now, biblical scholars, there's been some debate on what this was talking about. Nobody really knows. I mean, there's been speculations on various pagan deities, but it says that he's going to honor a foreign god. Now, the Hebrew is Elohim HaNakar. And this word nakar, it can mean foreign. But, like when we talk about people that come into our country illegal, what do we call them? We call them illegal aliens, right? So could he be saying an alien God? I don't know. Maybe. I'm not saying that Daniel had that in his mind when he wrote that, but the Hebrew text could literally be translated that way. So it would be a legitimate reading that the Antichrist worship a God his fathers did not know, an alien God. I don't know. It's possible. People in the UFO community, Richard Dolan, the historian I was telling you about before, have noticed that there's been one church who has stood up and has taken their place in the front of the line. He says the world's largest church seems to be positioning itself at the forefront of disclosure. The Vatican has long maintained several astronomical observatories and a collection of radio telescopes. In recent years, its hierarchy has stated in one form or another that we have company. Perhaps they know something is afoot or suspect its inevitability. So there's a wealth of evidence suggesting this conclusion. So here, Tom and I are walking up the road toward the large binocular telescope. This is the most powerful telescope in the world. They told us it gets sharper images than the Hubble Space Telescope. Okay, and it's way out in space on a satellite. Now, how is that possible? Here's the director of the Vorg in the 1990s, right when that went online. He gave a bunch of interviews, and one thing that he said I thought was rather startling is that he was going to ask extraterrestrials if they had ever experienced something like Adam and Eve, in other words, original sin. And so, I don't know what they're thinking. Right when their observatory goes online, he gives these interviews and starts talking about extraterrestrials. And he mentioned baptizing them as well. And, he's a PhD astronomer, but, it's not too fanciful for Tom and I to be asking the sorts of questions we are in our book, Exo Vaticana, because they've gone out in the media and said these things. So here's the large binocular telescope. Now you can see there's two huge mirrors. That's why they call it binocular. And of course, this is the Lucifer instrument, which is part of the large binocular telescope. And this is where you'll see all kinds of interesting articles on the internet about the Jesuits on top of Mount Graham with a telescope named Lucifer. It sounds really fantastic. It really stands, it's an acronym, but I think it's rather forced. It stands for Large Binocular Telescope Near Infrared Spectroscopic Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research. Okay. So, yeah, somebody went to pretty exorbitant lengths to shoehorn that in so they could say Lucifer, didn't they? Now, the idea that there are no Vatican UFO secrets. This is Daniel Sheehan, who was an attorney. He's got degrees from Harvard. He's tried many famous cases. The Karen Silkwood case, Iran-Contra, 3 Mile Island, Watergate. He was working for President Carter and tried to get the Jesuit. He was the lead counsel for the Jesuit order and was requested to get the Vatican UFO documents. Here's some testimony that he gave just this year, just a few months ago.
Carter asked to be briefed by the Director of Central Intelligence on the issue of UFOs. And in that meeting, CIA Director Bush asked the President-elect if the President-elect would leave him in as the Central Intelligence Agency Director, and that he would promise that he would never run for political office in his life if Carter would agree to keep him in as the Director of the CIA. Bush wanted to, at that time, become more or less like J. Edgar Hoover, had become at the FBI, that he would remain, that it would be above politics, that he would remain in that position. President Carter reiterated his request for the UFO information, saying that he had his own person in mind to be the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, which happened to be Teddy Sorensen at the time. And Bush at that time then refused to provide the information to him, saying that he did not have adequate clearances, he was not the president yet, and that he should ask his own Central Intelligence Agency director for that. But if he wanted to have the information ahead of time, then what he could do is he could contact the Science and Technology Committee of the House of Representatives, and that they had an ongoing relationship with the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Service that could go about getting things declassified to show him. That is what generated the request from the Congressional Research Service to me, as the General Counsel for the Jesuit headquarters in the United States, asking if I could gain access to the Vatican Library to obtain the information that the Vatican has in its library, in its classified sections, to deliver to the President for his review. I did that. I contacted the Jesuit, who happens to be the head of the Vatican Library, requesting this information. And much to my surprise, I was denied information.
So there you go. What do we make of that? You know, obviously they do have something to hide. He was the lead counsel for the Jesuit Order of the United States. He requested the information from the Vatican Library for the president's eyes, you know, for the United States president, and was refused. So here's our book, Exo Vaticana. I've only scratched the surface. I've just kind of laid the foundation